Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video we're going to be making a comparison between Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So in the video we'll be covering the models and the lore, we'll be looking at getting started, the differences there, and then focusing a lot of the video on rules and gameplay. If you're new to either of these games and you're looking at starting one, hopefully this video will help you to decide perhaps which direction to go in, or maybe you're already playing one game and fancy giving the other a go and just curious as to whether there are any overlaps and what the differences are. We'll be covering all those things, and by the end of it you should have a good idea about both of the games. A big thank you to everyone who took part in the poll I put up on the YouTube community site, and I put up some posts on my Facebook pages as well, so thanks so much for that, and Patreon too. Some great comments from Paladin, Pariah, Spooky and others, and you'll be seeing them popping up as we work our way through the video. But let's get started, and first of all we're going to look at the models. So this is a huge part of the hobby. Obviously which models appeal to you are going to influence which game you might want to play. If you want some vehicles that are sci-fi, space age, loads of guns everywhere, then of course you're going to be drawn towards Warhammer 40,000 above Age of Sigmar. And Redscope made a great point, who said that when you buy the units for Age of Sigmar, often they're much simpler. So for example, if you've got a unit of skeletons, you're going to give them all swords and a shield, or all spears and a shield, whereas in 40k you've got a lot more options for your unit. Say in just even a 5 or 10 man squad, you're going to have a number of different weapon profiles that you'll be using for the different models, so you'll be making dice rolls for lots of different weapons, whereas in Age of Sigmar that's a little bit simpler. So I think that's got quite a lot of appeal, but you know, one isn't better than the other. In 40,000 you might like that you've got more customization available and that you can have those different options, but in Age of Sigmar you might want something nice and simple. So I think having the two games that offer both of those things is really good. And you know, throughout this video I'm going to be making comparisons, but it doesn't mean one is better than the other, or one is right and one is wrong. It's just they're both pretty cool, and it's just what you prefer. So that's the idea with the video, really. Not to say which one is better, just to point out those comparisons and see which ones you like the best. So for example, with the skinks, you're going to pick the same weapon profile for every model in the unit, whereas once you start moving on to 40k, you've got a bit more options there going on. So in even a 5-man intercessor squad, you might give them the grenade launcher on one of them, for example, and then your sergeant is also going to have some extra weapons, maybe a different melee weapon. That's the kind of idea with it. For me personally, I like both systems. I think they're great. Age of Sigmar is brilliant on the table. It looks fantastic. When you're playing against other armies, it's awesome to see the big monsters, all the different beasts. You've got wings everywhere, spiky bits everywhere. Whereas with 40k, you've got tanks, guns, big chunky weapons. So a completely different look and feel on the table. I mean, definitely if you can, and you've got time and you've got the money, go for both games because they're really fun. But if you wanted to pick one over the other, just based on how the armies look, then I think Age of Sigmar comes out on top when it's on the table. It just looks beautiful, all laid out, and just the variety of models as well. There's so many you can choose from and build armies for. Yeah, I just think it looks brilliant when it's all done. I really like Krondis the Dragon. When I first saw him, before I painted him, I was like, oh, he's maybe a bit small, but on the table, he looks huge. In fact, when I played a game, I forgot to move him because he was more like a piece of terrain than an actual model, which, yeah, is ridiculous. But now, yeah, I move him now. But he's great, really cool, and looks awesome. So for me, if just the look of the army was something you're interested in on the table, playing against other people's armies as well, because that's a big part of the hobby, seeing what other people bring to the table and looking at their work and admiring the effort they've put into their army, then I think Age of Sigmar is going to come out on top for me. But when you see the tanks for 40k, the big Tyranids and all different monsters, that looks awesome as well. Of course, the Space Wolves are great fun, and the Adeptus Sororitas looks really nice when it's done well. So yeah, loads of options, but I would say Age of Sigmar for the look. Now let's have a look at getting started. So maybe you haven't played either of the games, or you've played one and want to try the other. You've got some options to get started with, and I think the obvious place a lot of people are going to go are for the starter sets. You've got the Age of Sigmar Warrior starter set, Harbinger and Extremis, and then the 3 versions for 40k as well. And they're very similar. You're going to get the starter set. It's going to be £32.50 for both systems. You're going to get enough models to get started with, just to learn the basic rules and movement and shooting and charging and combat, that kind of thing. Then you've got the mid-range for 65, few extra models. And then there's the larger sets, the Extremis for Age of Sigmar and Command Edition for Warhammer 40,000, both 110. Similar models to the Elite Edition, but you get some terrain now. And with Warhammer 40,000, you get the better core book as well. So you get the A5 version of that. But you can see here that you're not going to get that A5 book in all of the Warhammer 40,000 sets. So just in this one here. But when you look at the Warhammer Age of Sigmar ones, you can see that you do have a core book with the core rules, at least, in each one. So that's going to give you all of the full core rules in a little A5 book. So for £32.50 to get that with the models and everything else, I think it's really nice. You also get the War Scrolls printed off in Age of Sigmar, which I think makes a massive difference when you're playing the game. Really helpful. Saves you flicking in the books. You can literally hold the card in your hand like you would with the skirmish game, like Warcry or something like that. You've got everything to hand all in one place with a quick reference. And the abilities are a lot easier. They flow better. They're written a lot nicer. So for me, the starter set for £32.50, again, I think Age of Sigmar comes out on top purely because they do include these core books in every one, and they've got those War Scrolls. So I will say, don't make that a deal breaker, because the barrier to entry for both games is pretty low. Sometimes you can be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of books available, but the Warhammer 40,000 core rules and the Warhammer Age of Sigmar core rules are all available completely free as PDFs from the Warhammer community site. So they're official rule sets. You're not getting like a pirated copy or anything like that. They are the official ones from Games Workshop, available on their own Warhammer community site. So you can get all the rules you need to play the game for free. And if you're playing casually, that's everything you need in there, especially for Age of Sigmar. For Warhammer 40,000, you might need a few extra rules for terrain when you start doing more competitive play and things like that. But for casual play, this is all you need. And to learn the game, you certainly don't need any more than these two rule sets at the beginning. With the rule sets free, all you need are a few models to get started. So I think barrier to entry is very low for the games. Don't be put off by the amount of books that you do see, because just getting that starter set for either 40k or Age of Sigmar is going to be enough to get you going, and then you just slow grow from there. You don't have to buy a massive army, you don't need thousands of points to begin with. Just start small and build up. Get the free rules first, have a read through, maybe proxy with some models you've got at home for other games so you don't have to buy anything. Then you don't have to spend any money at all to give it a go. And I think that's really important. Don't feel like you have to invest hundreds of pounds to play the game. But of course, once you get started and it gets the hooks into you, you are going to want to grow your army, and you will expect to be paying out then to get the models you want. Now let's have a look at books, and some people really like to read the books as part of the hobby and then use the lore to influence how they play on the table, or maybe they just read the books and then play the game competitively, but just like the whole thing combined as part of their hobby and how they like to do it. For me, this isn't something I've read an awful lot. I've done a few 40k books, and I really enjoyed one of them, especially Battle of the Fang. That was the Space Wolves against Thousand Suns. That was a really good book, but I haven't really ventured further than that. And the Warcry Compendium book, which has got some great short stories introducing you to the different war bands. As I'm not a big reader, I'm not really probably the best person to talk about the book side of it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the Black Library for Age of Sigmar and 40k? Let me know in the comments section down below. And that brings us nicely on to narrative. Great way to play the game, but also influences how you might play it. I mean, I really like narrative games where you're creating a story, or a bit more of a relaxed game, but I also like match play. That's really grown on me over the past few months, especially in Warhammer 40,000. Once you start learning more and more of the stratagems and learning how important the secondary objectives are, that's a completely different game almost than playing narrative. So really fun, really very different. But I really like narrative, and as Joseph pointed out, the major difference to him is that between 40k and Age of Sigmar, in the settings and the sense of perspective you get from them. And that's really shown in the maps. When you see the fantasy maps compared to the space maps, is very different, and also where the battles take place has a very different feel to it. So that's certainly going to influence the vibe of the game as well. You've got the sci-fi battles across the universe, against rather more in a fantasy world setting, so you're moving from one region to another. And so that's going to maybe influence the campaigns that you play for sure, because as you're playing the campaigns, you're getting a sense of distance as you move, maybe conquer different areas and complete different tasks. That's a very important part of the game too. As well as playing in the different settings, you've also got different characters, and I really like the 40k characters. Snickrot with the new model coming out is fantastic, loads of character there, and then you've got other ones like Cypher, really mysterious character, really fun. So I really like the characters in 40k. I think they stand out a little bit more to me than they do in Age of Sigmar. So if you like really following the story of a particular character and playing out how that character develops and grows, then maybe 40k might be better for that. But again, I'd like to hear your opinion on that. If you've been playing 40k and Age of Sigmar, let me know down below what you think about the characters and which ones stand out the most to you. Now we're on to how the rules are written. And this is actually one of the points where I'm going to make a direct comparison based on which is better. For me, the Age of Sigmar rules are far better than any of the other games. Warcry's pretty good. A kill team's a word salad for sure, very difficult. It's like reading a contract sometimes. Warhammer 40k is pretty straightforward, but the way Age of Sigmar is written is just brilliant. I think they've done a fantastic job. Whoever wrote these rules did a brilliant job, because first up, everything's numbered. Nice simple idea. You can see you've got the bold headings, so you know each section is clearly marked, and then you've got keywords highlighted as you work through the text, so you can pick those out really quickly and easily. You've got some nice notes and examples to the side. I love that. And then you've got some big highlighted sections here for some important parts of the rules that they want to stand out a little bit. So all those things put together makes this really easy to read, digest, remember and learn. So I think the way they've done it, the layout is bang on, and my favourite out of all the games. I wish I'd started playing Age of Sigmar earlier. I put it off way too long, but really happy I'm into it now. But Warhammer 40k isn't too bad either. I think the way it's put together is quite nice, and then they've got these sections with the bullet points which really give you the main bits of information. So when you've got the free PDF to hand at the table when you're playing a game, you can quickly have a look at the bullet points and often get the information you need. But again, with Age of Sigmar, the core rules are very quick to navigate as well. You can flick through them really easily, especially with the General's Handbook. That really does help. Here you can see the General's Handbook and the Chapter Approved, which is the 40k version. So both of these you're going to get if you're into match play especially, but I think the General's Handbook's really nice to get those rules to hand in a ring binder, which really helps too. The Chapter Approved has also got rules in there, but that ring binder really makes a huge difference because it can lay flat on the table. It's only small A5 as well, so they're the same size, but it's got tabs inside it, which mean you can navigate very quickly for the sections and the rules that you need. And I've done a video breaking down everything that's included in the General's Handbook, and one for the Chapter Approved as well, if you'd like to see the differences of those in more detail. Right, now we've covered all that, we're on to the gameplay. This is going to take up the rest of the video now, so this is a big part. Lots of comments coming in about gameplay, and here's some about initiative. That's a big part, so we're going to look at that first. And from Nathaniel and Matthew, both saying that initiative and for each turn makes a big difference and has a big effect on the game. So that's very important and very true. Who gets the initiative first in both games is going to be important, but in 40k maybe a little bit more to get that first turn. Where in Age of Sigmar, sometimes you'll want to go second, because in Age of Sigmar you've got the option to go for a double turn, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, choosing who gets the initiative is going to be very important in both games, but different effects. And I would say even for 40k actually, sometimes you want to go second depending on secondary. So I think if you're playing match play and you've got your army set up for some specific secondaries and maybe counter-attack style of play, you might want to go second. But you'll always be going second. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, you won't always be going second because you roll each time to see who has the initiative in each round. So if you went second in round 1, you could roll for initiative in round 2, and then you could go first, so you get a double turn. But it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. It's not like a total wipeout as you would imagine in 40k. But let's continue and we'll have a look at initiative in more detail. Okay, so going first. In 40k, if you can go first and you've got an army like the Astra Militarum, you're going to be shooting as many guns as you can into the enemy and doing some pretty destructive things. So turn 1 can be pretty good, especially if you like that Alpha Strike style of play. whereas in Age of Sigmar, things are more melee, I would say. Of course, there are shooting armies as well. You've got Caradon Overlords. Stormcast Eternals can have a lot of shooting options. But many armies are more about moving and then charging the enemy and then getting stuck in to some close combat action. With the idea of more close combat, you still might think going first isn't a great idea for Age of Sigmar, but it's slightly different to 40k in the combat as well. So when you're in combat, it's not the side that does all the charging that goes first. They'll choose one unit to go first, but it won't be all of the charging units that go first. Choose one unit first, and then you'll alternate. And we'll talk about that in a little while. And that brings us on to the idea of the double turn. In Age of Sigmar, you can either want the double turn, or you might be playing where it's not to your favour. And so that initiative becomes quite important and quite exciting when you're rolling the dice to see who's going to get it. I played a game the other day and I didn't win the initiative once in all 5 rounds. And it sounds like a disaster, but it wasn't, because we were involved in close combat mostly. It didn't really affect the game. There wasn't that much movement going on because we were tied up quite early and we were only playing a few objectives. So it didn't really matter at all. But in bigger games, it can certainly be more important where movement is a bigger concern. Now, in Warhammer 40k, imagine getting a double turn with the Astra Militarum when you're in shooting range of everything. You're effectively doubling your army for one attack, which is insane. And that just wouldn't happen in Age of Sigmar. So while it sounds crazy, I thought at first, after playing 40k for a while, then going on to Age of Sigmar, and there's just the thought of a double turn sounded mental, that you would be having the potential to do all that damage. It doesn't really work out like that, and it's excellent fun. I love it. I think it also brings some narrative value to the game as well, as the battle can kind of turn and twist and go from one side's favour to the other quite quickly, and that's really interesting. I think that's really cool, but it's not to the point where they would get a massive advantage, because you also get more command points if you go second, so that's really helpful when it comes back to that combat. There's certainly pros and cons. Really fun part of the game. Certainly wouldn't want to do it in 40k as the rules stand at the moment. Again, one isn't better than the other. I don't mind 40k. At first I was getting fed up with the you go first, I go second, and then it's a huge advantage. But then once I started learning to play secondaries, I realised going second can be really good for you, and so you can set your army up for that, and also the way you deploy before you start the game is really important, because you almost set up as if you're going to go second so that you're not having too many of your important units out in the open. But there's loads of things like that to consider, and that's where the tactical side of the game becomes really fun. Now let's move on to combat. So this is one of the big differences between the two game systems and the mechanics that are set up here. And the great comments all around this, like pointing out from Com Sommelettes that 40k has all charging units fight first. And we talked about that earlier, where in Age of Sigmar, there's much more back and forth. So it's not all about the charge, and that's not going to guarantee you to fight first with all of your units. So a big thing. And of course, no plasma guns in Age of Sigmar, as Sam pointed out. So here we go. Let's go through an example of how it works. So here we've got some Age of Sigmar models ready to do combat. And they're going to make some charges from the Flesh Eater Courts here, and they're going to charge the Skinks. So all 3 units are going to make a charge. They rolled well and they were successful, so they're all within range. Now it's up to the Flesh Eater Courts to choose one of their units to fight first. So they pick the one in the middle. Then it goes to the Skinks. They're going to get to choose one of their units who fights second. They pick the one at the top. Obviously, they don't want to go with the one who's just been attacked, because there's no one else that's going to attack them. So imagine there's a gap between all 3 of these combats here going on. Then we go to the third, and we're alternating now, back and forth. We keep going like this until all the units who are eligible to fight have fought. And that's how Age of Sigmar works. Nice and simple. The charging units go first, and then it's back and forth, unless there's some rules that specifically say the unit fights first or the unit fights last. Now let's have a look at how this works with Warhammer 40,000. So here we've got some Gene Stealers who are going to charge the Adeptus Sororitas. All 3 units make their charge, again rolling really well, and now it's up to them to make sure that each one of the units that charged go first. So they're going to get first, second and third activations of combat. Then if the Adeptus Sororitas are still surviving and the units are still intact, or they've got any models left, they're then going to make their attacks back. So very different, completely different tactic, different way to play, completely different game, obviously, so that's going to influence perhaps how you want to play. So if you like the idea of charging everything in your turn, then going fighting first with those units, then that's going to be 40k. If you like the back and forth more, then Age of Sigmar might be the more for you. I find with Age of Sigmar, it all kind of blends in a lot more. So you do feel like it's one continuous battle, with each side having a go at each other in both turns. Whereas in 40k, there's a very clear definition between whose turn it is and who's doing the combat, or at least who's instigating the combat. Another difference with Age of Sigmar is that as units are killed and removed from the table, there's loads of mechanics that can bring them back. So sometimes you could kill a unit and it'll come back maybe at half strength or in full, depending on the abilities available to that army. So that's a very different thing as well. Sometimes we see that with the heroes in 40k, but in Age of Sigmar, it's very common for a whole unit to come back. And that's all to do with the lore and the magic and everything. And I think that's really fun too. But of course, sometimes in 40k, when you kill something, you often know you've killed it for good, and that's the end of it. But in Age of Sigmar, they pop back up and keep coming at you. Let's stick with combat a little bit longer and have a look at wounds and how that plays out, because that's a pretty big difference as well in both games. In Warhammer 40,000, let's imagine we've got a character, the one on the right here, who's got more damage per attack. So in one attack, let's just say he does 5 points of damage. If he attacks a unit with that one attack, that 5 points of damage can only go onto one model, because that one attack can only attack one model. And that model might only have a wounds characteristic of 1. Now those other 4 wounds that are left, they're going to be lost. They're completely gone, and you can't do anything else with them. So this is going to really push you to be using those heavy hitting characters to perhaps go after other heavy hitting characters, or at least vehicles, monsters, and characters with higher wound counts. It definitely sucks when you get one of your heavy hitters close to a unit like this and you can only do a certain amount of damage, especially with shooting as well, not just in combat. But losing those wounds where they don't carry over, yeah, that sucks a little bit, but definitely makes you play the game differently. In Age of Sigmar, let's look at the Annihilator on the right here, who can dish out 3 points of damage with every attack, potentially. So let's say he's going up against these bone splitters now, and that one attack is successful. It hits and it wounds, and the bone splitters don't make a save roll. Now those 3 wounds will be applied to the unit. This guy will take 1, and then there'll be 2 left. But in Age of Sigmar, they carry over, so you can keep using them all until all those damage points have been used up. So in this case, you've wiped out the whole unit of 3 bone splitters. I do like this mechanic in Age of Sigmar, great fun. But it's also fun in Warhammer 40k when you do go up against a character with more wounds and you can take a load off them and potentially kill them with one attack too. That's also fun. Both great to play, both with pros and cons, but I think for me, Age of Sigmar, that carrying over is a really nice mechanic that I wouldn't mind seeing in 40k, in 10th maybe, but I don't think they will do that. Now let's have a look at knowing your enemy. This, I've learned, is a huge part of Warhammer 40,000. If you know what your opponent's army can do, that gives you a massive advantage. If you know their stratagems, you can have an idea of what they can do against perhaps some tactics you're going to do to them. And there's a lot of stratagems across the factions. It's insane. A huge amount to learn. I'll say it's beyond me. I haven't got the time or inclination really to learn all of those. I don't even know if I could, even if I wanted to. It's a huge amount, and I think it takes a certain kind of mind to do that. But in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, I think it's possible, or at least for me, the way it's all written, I think I could remember that. I think I could know my enemy a lot better in Age of Sigmar than I do in 40,000. So I've often felt in Warhammer 40,000 that sometimes you're playing against good people. They know your army better than you do, and so they can react and do things because they know more than you know about your own army and the units, and so they'll know who to attack first, which are your weak points, and then they'll also use stratagems to exploit those weak points. And that's a really cool part of the game, and if you can do that, then brilliant. But for me, I think Age of Sigmar is an easier one to learn. There's no stratagems as such. There's fewer abilities, so they're more easier to remember. And I think with the factions, even though there are a lot of factions, the way it's written flows a lot better, makes a lot more sense to me personally. And so I think if I had to pick one or the other, I would pick Age of Sigmar as an easier system to know the enemy and learn what your opponents can do. And also, if you haven't got time to do that, I don't think it matters as much as it does with Warhammer 40,000, at least if you're playing match play. Of course, if you're playing narrative play, it doesn't matter one way or the other, and it can be fun not knowing what your enemy can do, because then you're reacting to it, and then it really feels like a battle. You don't always know what your enemy's got up their sleeve, what weapons they've got, what new innovations they're bringing to the battle. So things like that. I think there's, again, pros and cons to all of this. But for me, Age of Sigmar is standing out at the moment and giving me the potential to learn all about the different factions and know my enemy a lot more. This is something that Alex pointed out, that Age of Sigmar, to him at least, is also more intuitive and easier to learn. Doesn't have massive amounts of gotcha stratagems like 40k. And removing that gotcha element is really important. It can definitely spoil the fun sometimes. It can also add to the fun, makes it quite interesting. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. And so getting rid of that gotcha moment could be quite cool. And if you don't like that kind of thing, then perhaps you might favour Age of Sigmar. If you like these kind of surprises and you want to surprise people, then maybe 40k is the way to go. For me, I think 40k with the data cards, there's an awful lot to go through. I just can't remember them all. It's a lot. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, you've got a different way of doing things. You've got command abilities that both players could use. Each player will get different command abilities they can use in a turn, and they're almost reactions. So you're reacting to what your opponent's doing, and then using your command points to use a command ability to do something that's going to help you either attack them, defend yourself, move out of the way, that kind of thing. So that's really nice. Everyone knows what everyone else can use, which I think is brilliant. Of course, there's going to be times where there's extra command abilities, like with the Stormcast Eternals. They've got a unique enhancement called Call for Aid, and this is a command ability that allows them to bring a unit back. But there's not too many of those, so if you wanted to flick through and look through all of the faction enhancements, it wouldn't take that long, and then you could get a quick understanding of the kind of command abilities that could pop up in addition to the universal ones. I really like these universal ones. I think everyone having the same ones here is brilliant. Very similar to Horus Heresy in the reaction side of things. And this would be really cool if 40k 10th introduces something similar. Cuts down on the stratagems a little bit and puts some universal stratagems in place that are more like reactions. I'd love to see that in the game, because I think it does add to it. But if you want something more in depth, something you really need to learn, then you'll love the data cards. It's a really cool option to have if you've got the focus to just play one game. I think you would learn them. I think if you just focused on one game, you'd have a lot easier time of learning it. But if you're like me and you like flicking around different games, it's a pretty big task to be learning all the stratagems for 40k and all the command abilities for Age of Sigmar, and then the skirmish games on top of that too. So yeah, I think if you're playing one game, you'd have a better time. That might be something you consider as well, just choosing one game or playing lots. It's up to you. We could really talk about each point in loads of detail. It's so nuanced, the conversation here between the different things. I think it's really fun. That's a great part of the hobby, which I really enjoy. Let's move on to the next part, waiting your turn. And in Age of Sigmar and 40k, this is quite different. A lot of people say in 40k they don't like waiting for the opponent to do the turn. I quite like it, because you can see what they're up to. You're not just standing there like not observing it. You can watch what they're doing and then imagine what you're going to do next. Prepare for your counters. Prepare for your unit that's going to be perhaps attacked, so you're ready to give the data across from the data card, so they know what dice to roll and things like that. So I do feel engaged still. I don't mind. I quite like it. I like the back and forth in 40k. I also like the back and forth in Age of Sigmar, but it does draw you in a lot more. You certainly feel like you're more engaged and involved in each round. As I said earlier, the turns tend to all blend together, especially when you're in close combat and the fighting's starting to happen and there's not too much movement going on. But 40k, some people do say, or quite a lot of people actually say, they don't like having to wait so long for their opponent. And I think the reactions, if they do bring in that, is going to really help. Chris makes a nice comment, said the one thing I do like Age of Sigmar does is have all the psychic and hero abilities in the one phase, which makes bookkeeping much easier. And that's really cool. In the phases, you've got like lots of things you can do. In the hero phase, you can do magic spells, heroic actions, and there's a command ability option too. The good thing is, that's not just for the player whose turn it is, because if they cast a magic spell, you've got the opportunity to unbind it. The same for the heroic actions. They'll choose one first, and then the player whose turn it isn't will choose a heroic action too, and then both have got access to the command ability. That's really fun. All in one phase, nice and neat, clearly laid out, and both players are involved. I really like that. You find that this continues throughout the game, and as you can see here, you've got command abilities for each phase, so the same thing takes place. And then you've got Monstrous Rampage. If you've got any monsters on the battlefield in Age of Sigmar, at the end of the charge phase, every monster can do this, whether it's your turn or not. That's really fun, because your monsters are really getting stuck in and affecting it, and it's quite thematic. Like the roar, for example, is so loud that it's stopping your opponent from hearing any orders, so they can't have any orders that phase. That's great. I really like how that's playing out, because it feels like something that would really happen. That I really like. So these are little things that I think are very fun. Of course, you've got stratagems in 40k that can do things like this, but you have to decide when to use them. You have to know when you can use them, where it says on the card. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, it clearly states what you can do, when you can do it, and both players know. So that's a bit of a difference. It's not so much in Age of Sigmar you've got more things you can do. You've probably got like less things you can do, but it does tell you exactly when and how to do them. It's very clear. But in 40k, not so clear, but perhaps more options. So again, whichever you prefer is going to be the direction to go in. Now that takes us on to what it's like to play different armies. And you can imagine where I'm going to go with this after everything we've talked about so far. With 40k, I'd struggle to play different armies. One mistake I did was before I learnt one army, I'd get so excited, move on, build another one, not learn all the rules, go back and forth, not really know how to play the game properly, really. And it was fun, though, the narrative side, but trying to play match play like that didn't really work out so well. But in narrative, it could be quite cool. But in Age of Sigmar, I think going from one army to the next is going to be easier because, again, you've got those command abilities that you're going to use with each army. So you're not learning a new set of stratagems as such. You are going to learn some new abilities and things that cross over, but not as many. So if you want to play lots of different armies, you might find Age of Sigmar easier to learn them. Whereas if you want to go a bit deeper and have more depth to one army, then you're definitely going to like 40k better. Again, swings and roundabouts, whichever you prefer, that's the way you're going to go. So more depth with 40k, less depth but easier to play lots of armies in Age of Sigmar. I think that's how I would weigh it up. This idea was emphasised by Felix, who said that he'd done the same thing. He'd picked a 40k army and then an Age of Sigmar and noticed there is a big difference between learning how to play that. So if you want something that's going to be quicker to learn, I think Age of Sigmar is the way, but that depth that will come through playing over time is going to be certainly a lot more in 40k. There we go then, that's covered nearly everything. We've got one more thing to talk about, that's tournament play. So let's get on to that in a second, but hopefully you've enjoyed the video so far. I'd love to hear what you think about everything. Let me know in the comments section below what you think about any of the different topics that we've gone through in the video. It's certainly gone on longer than I thought it would, but we could have nuanced conversations about so many different elements of the hobby. We could go on all day, I think. So let's bring it to an end and have a look at the final topic of this video, which will be playing match play at tournaments. Now, tournaments are something I'm spending a lot of time focusing on at the moment. I've been looking at them, the UK scene. I'd really like to hold a tournament. I think that's something I'm going to do in the very near future. So look out for more information on that soon. And I think Age of Sigmar would be a great tournament to do. And although it would be match play, the narrative side of it certainly would come across well, I think, in a tournament and certainly in the build up to it. So look out for that coming soon. But for 40k, I've done some tournaments at my local club that they've set up there. Great fun, and I loved it. I've really learned a lot. The match play can be really exciting, really interesting, and it's great just to get everyone together in one place and get a load of games in one day, and a little bit of a competitive edge too, but more fun than anything because it's pushing you to learn the game too, develop some tactics and just improve. I think it's great improving what you can do. But I'd love to do this with Age of Sigmar. I think it would look great having all the different armies set up across loads of different tables with a nice narrative theme running through it while sticking to some matched play at the same time. I think that would be great. But the two, again, I think both of these are going to be really fun in tournament. I know 40k is awesome fun. I think Age of Sigmar is going to be up there too. And I can't wait to share more information about that with you very soon. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful. I hope it's given you a little insight into the two games. If you're anything like me, then you'll go from one game to the next, learn it, move on to the next, then come back round in a full circle, play it again. I think that's a great part of the hobby. I started off with Warcry when I started the channel a couple of years ago, then went on to Kill Team 40k, now back round to Age of Sigmar, and I'm having a great time. It's really fun. It can be quite intense trying to learn all these different rule sets, as well as writing my own with Weekend Warriors that you might have seen. But I love it. I think it's fun to learn and improve. And then once you try all these different games, you might focus on one more than the other. Go through a spell where you're working on one game and focusing on that, and that's something I do, and I've done that with Warcry, Kill Team 40k, and now I'll do it for Age of Sigmar for a bit, but don't worry, I'll still be bringing you all the Kill Team and 40k content as normal. I'm moving around the screen a little bit now, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like it, please hit the like button, subscribe as well. That'd be awesome if you consider subscribing to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for helping me to keep going with these daily videos. If you like this kind of thing and want to see more of these longer videos, let me know in the comments section down below. And if you'd like to join the community and support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon page down in the description. It'd be awesome to see you there.